Howdy, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? Sweet.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I have to apologize. I made all this big fuss about everyone being to class today, and then I decided to go and get sick over the weekend. And I mean, it's just a cold, but I figured it was better to stay home and not contaminate everybody, but that meant that we would need to go online today. So I apologize for that. But let's get started and let's get attendance taken care of, and then we can get going with with everything. All right, so let's see. I don't see Arturo. Carter is here. Colin is here. Let's see, is Javier here? Not yet. Jeremiah's not here. Let's see, Joseph is, Christy is, Madison, Oscar. Let's see, Shandon, Shane, Skylar, Tristan, William's not here. Wyatt's not here. Okay. All right. So, let's see. I'm trying to figure out a way to. There. All right. So if we go to today's week in Moodle, November 2nd through November 8th, you'll see the research proposal walkthrough. And what I've tried to do here is create as extensive a guide as I can with as many resources as I can to help you to complete your research proposal. This research proposal is going to be due November 29th, which is about 3 weeks from now. Well, 3.5 weeks. It will be due the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So what I wanted to do was give you a little bit extra time to get everything done. And the idea of this proposal is it is a capstone to just about everything that we have done in this class. It is going to combine the organizational communications concepts that we've covered and the research concepts that we've covered all into one overall project. And so you're going to be using both textbooks pretty regularly throughout this project. So let's begin by taking a look at this template. And actually, what I'm going to try to do is see if I can change this so it's a little bit bigger. There we go. All right. So basically, this is a framework for what you're going to be writing. And I have a copy of this on the main page. If we go back to the main class, there is a copy of this in Word format that you can download and use directly. It's already got all of the embedded stuff that you need to use in terms of headers, the table of contents, all that kind of stuff. That's already formatted for you if you download that template into Microsoft Word and then leave it alone and then just start working on it. Okay. For the sake of this paper, I'm going to ask that the paper is written in Microsoft Word. I know that some of you might not have access to that at home. We do have that installed on every computer lab in campus. And so I'm going to ask you to make sure that you do that. Okay. All right. So to begin, you're going to have a title page. This one's kind of already outlined in the correct format. All you would need to do is add your title and then add your name and then the correct date. Okay, I'm going to ask you to create an abstract. An abstract is normally a statement that kind of outlines the overall paper. It should be less than 150 words total, so about a paragraph. You're going to have a table of contents. Like I said, the document that I have added already has this created and ready to go, and it will update as you go through it. Okay, we're going to start with an introduction. We're going to state a research problem, a research question, and the need for research. And I'm going to go into more detail on all of these things. I just want to give you the broad overview of what we're talking about. Okay, so we'll have a paragraph for the introduction, a paragraph for the research problem, a paragraph for the research question, and then a paragraph outlining the need or significance of the research. Okay, our next section is we're going to be doing a review of literature. We're going to be discussing our theoretical framework, which should sound very familiar to everybody. You're going to be using at least 2 outside academics sources for this section. You're also going to be doing some review of literature on the research topic, the research setting, the research population, and then the methodology that you're thinking about using. And for each one of these, you're going to be using at least 2 outside sources. So if you're doing the math, you're going to be doing at least 10 outside sources for this paper. The methodology itself, you're going to tell me what your research method is going to be. You're going to describe in specific what your sample population is going to be, how you would collect data, and then how you would analyze it. You're also going to be discussing the feasibility of the research. Are there questions about the method that you're using? Are there limitations to your study in terms of, well, it might be hard to get a hold of this particular group of people, or I might need to get this thing. What are the things that would need to be in place that are unique to this study that might make it difficult to complete? And then are there alternate options? Are there other ways of doing this research that haven't been included? Finally, you're going to be discussing the attractiveness of the research. What benefits would come? What is the value or interest that should be generated by this research? Who would care and why? And then finally, you're going to write a conclusion. At the very end, you'll have your references page. Okay, so this is the overall construction of the paper. So I'm going to stop for just a second. And before we get too far in, exactly, Shane. The instruments that we have right now will only let me do this. So what are those constraints? What are those limitations that you see that could make it doesn't mean that you can't do the research, but it might be difficult to do the research. So for example, with the study that I did for my dissertation, one of my constraints was I had a full-time job. I could not take time off to travel to all the geographical locations where these faculty members lived to do the interviews face-to-face. So I had to use online interviews. Some people think that online interviews aren't as good as face-to-face. So I had to identify that that was a constraint and then prove that my study could still be valid doing it online compared to traditional ways of doing it face-to-face. Okay, so I'm going to stop for just a second. And I know that we've just all I've done is given you a broad perspective of this study. And we're going to get into more details about all of the specifics, but I want to stop for just a second. Does anybody have any questions up to this point?
So what would be a good outside source to get your information from?
And please don't hold back.
I don't think he heard you, Shane.
So what would be a good outside source to get your information from?
That's a great question. What I would probably recommend is when you look at the research that you're going to be doing, the problem you're going to be investigating, is related to organizational communication. So it's not just business in general, it's related to one of the concepts that we have already covered in the organizational communications text. So it might be something like diversity, team building, stress, issues with leadership, issues with following, the dark side of communications, all of those different chapters that we covered. That's where you're going to start, is you're going to pick one of those topics from that textbook and identify a problem in the workplace related to one of those concepts. Okay. So having said that, what I would probably do is I would go and open up the organizational communications textbook and look at that section and then do what I would call a reverse bibliography. I would look at what sources did they cite. And then I would look from those sources, what sources did those sources cite, and then continue working outward from there. Does that answer your question?
Can you say the last bit again? My internet was cutting out on me.
Okay. Actually, we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute. I actually have some walkthroughs that I have included that might be helpful to you.
Okay.
All right. So one important question that is probably going to come up is, so the overall project is due on November 29th. Based on some feedback that I got on our case studies, one of the comments that I got was it might be helpful if we had more specific timelines and due dates to kind of keep us on track about what needs to be done to get this done in time. So what I'm going to put in is that our research proposal introduction is going to be due this Sunday. So I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what we need to get done this Sunday. The due date is set for Sunday, November 8th. However, you can still turn this assignment in for full credit up until November 29th. But the idea is to give you some more specific timelines to kind of gauge how well you're doing. Okay, so let's take a look at the research introduction. So this is what's going to be required by November 8th on Sunday. A carefully considered, precise title that succinctly indicates the nature and direction of your project. Okay, so that title page, I've already drafted it. All you have to do is change the name, the date, and the title, and that a part of these, and number 1 is completed. Okay. Number 2, a properly formatted summary that summarizes the overall content of your prospectus in about 150 words. A properly formatted table of contents that includes the abstract page and all level 1, 2, and 3 headers. Like I said, the template that I have on Moodle already has that formatted, as long as you don't mess around with it. Okay. Number 4, an introduction to the problem through a brief example or anecdote related to the topic. So what we want to do here is to take the concept of whatever issue you want to investigate as your research and identify a very brief 1-paragraph story or example illustration that would help somebody to understand from a business perspective how this issue of communications could be problematic or an issue. Does that make sense to everybody? This does not have to be cited, and it doesn't actually even have to be real. You can create a hypothetical. So something that has not necessarily happened to you, but that is believable, could be used as that introductory paragraph.
So introductory is pretty much a situation that we would be researching then, is what I'm gathering.
It would be a situation that would suggest, okay, so I ran into this problem, and this is why I need to do more research on this topic, because I didn't know how to deal with X.
Okay, sorry, okay.
No, that's a perfect example. So we want to create a situation that makes people believe, yeah, this is a problem that people would run into. Yeah, this is a reality. Man, it would be nice to know more about this, whatever this is. But
So,
it needs to be connected back to organizational communication. So it has to be connected to one of the ideas that we covered in that organizational communications textbook. Okay, Madison, you had a question.
no, you'd sorry, you'd cleared it up pretty well. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the idea is that this is not about just your field or your workplace in general. It has to have something to do with organizational communications. That's the focus of this class. Therefore, that's what your topic has to come from. Okay. Then I want you to establish a statement as just like in the case studies that we did. What is the problem here? So you've given me an example or an illustration, a brief summary of a case, and then right after that you need to say, here's why this is a problem. Here's how this is complicating life and why this problem needs to be figured out or examined. Okay, so those are two separate paragraphs. One is the case or example, and then one is the statement of the central problem that prompted your research. Okay. Next, you're going to create the question your proposal will try to address. And if you notice over to the side, I have links to sources that explain how to create a table of contents, how to write an abstract, how to develop a problem statement, which is what I was just talking about, some ideas about how to write good research questions if you're trying to figure that out. And then finally, a paragraph that explains the particular need for the sort of project you propose to undertake. What is the significance? Why is it important for us to do this? Why do we need to know the answer to this question? Of all the questions we could be answering, why should we answer this one? Okay. So just to review, by Sunday, steps 1, 2, and 3 are almost already done for you. All you have to do is just update the document. Step 4, 5, 6, and 7 are about each a paragraph long. Okay. You're going to write your case example, a situation that illustrates the problem. 2, an explanation of why that's a problem. 3, a question that you want to answer related to the problem. And then finally, an explanation of why that problem is so important to answer. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they would like to understand or discuss more about this before we keep moving on? So the plan is on Wednesday and Friday, we will be in class on computers writing drafts of all of these elements to make sure, and then printing them out so that I can give you feedback to make sure you're on track for submitting this stuff by Sunday. What happens if I don't have it all done on Sunday?
It can still be turned in by the 29th.
It can still be turned in. You have until the 29th to turn it in.
We can revise it.
What's that? And you can revise as much as you need. And likely as you're writing this, you might find yourself revising, and that's fine. But one of the things you're going to want to realize, if I don't have this stage done by Sunday, it puts me behind the 8 ball of getting the next stage done. And it's very difficult to get the next stage done without having the first stage finished. Okay, so it really should be serving as a reminder of What needs to be done and when, and how well are you producing or keeping up with things? There will be no penalties for turning things in after the initial due date, but I will not accept anything after the 29th. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. So does it have to be something that hasn't been done before?
Well, the thing is that when you ask that question, the idea is that you can always do a study that's been done before, but you can do it with a new sample population.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the value of doing it with a new sample?
You get different perspectives on what's going on.
Okay. And
You
if
have a
it's
modernization of the thing.
okay, it could be I could modernize it and see is it still true because time has passed since the original study was done. By bringing in new people, I can see if the theory is still accurate from what it was before. Okay. Are there any other ideas? What would be the value of doing a study over again if it's already been done? Anybody?
Correct an issue that you saw with the old study.
I can see if I can see if the idea is can it be replicated? If this was the finding then, can it still be replicated? Do we have new technology now that might change who we had access to? We might have access to more people for this study than we would have had in the original. Now, one of the nice things is all you're doing in this entire thing is proposing. You're not doing any of this. So one of the cool things you can say, well, this is going to cost $100,000 because you're never going to do it. You don't, that's not, you can identify that as a constraint, but you don't actually have to solve the constraint, which makes life as a researcher incredibly nice because all of this is just hypothetical. Okay. Anything else? Does anybody have any questions about the items required by Sunday?
So we're just doing 1, 2, and 3 by Sunday, right?
when
Pretty
you
much
see
like
1, 2,
The
when you
whole
see-
section.
yeah, the whole section 1.
by Sunday.
1, 2, and 3 are done for you in the formatting style already.
Yeah. The template that I have on the page basically already has 1, 2, and 3 done. So all you're going to have to do on the introduction section is steps 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay.
Okay. In step 2, we're going to be doing a literature review. Now, remind me what a literature review is. Anybody?
Looking at things that already exist on what you're studying. So what other people have written about it and so on and so forth.
Exactly. What's the value or purpose of a literature review?
To know what has been done or what was not done per se.
Okay. Number one, for your own benefit as a researcher to know what has and hasn't already been done. But what's the purpose of having to do the writing and doing this literature review where you write it all up? What's the benefit of that?
It gives us more experience in writing, and besides that, it shows that we already know this knowledge.
Exactly. It shows other people, other experts in the field, when they go and look at your research, they're going to be able to determine, does this person really know what they're talking about? Are they up to date with the most important and new stuff, right? You've got to prove that you know your crap is really what you're doing. You're proving that you're qualified to talk about this. It's one thing to say I've read it, but if I show you and I summarize what I've read, it proves what I do and don't already know. And it's important because it shows that I get to show people I know who is important and who's not important in this field. Who are the people that I should know about? If I really know what I'm talking about, who should I know? Does that make sense to everybody? So the idea here is you're trying to just prove to your audience that if I really know what I'm talking about, I should know this person and this person and this person. Right? And if I know those people, then it's likely that I know other things. So what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to do this. So you're going to have this broken into 5 areas. The theoretical influence, that should sound very familiar. That's our theoretical perspectives that we used from the case studies. So you can use sources that you used in those case studies as the sources to define, here's what theoretical influence I'm going to bring to this study. I'm going to look at things through a postmodernist, through a postpositivist, through an interpretivist, through a critical theorist. You're going to tell me what that means. And so you're going to use several different sources, which you should already have, to define what your theoretical influence is and base that on information that other people have already written. So you should already have that one pretty much good to go. Then you're going to talk about primary and or secondary sources related to the topic. This is the idea that comes from the textbook. What is the textbook? You can't use the textbook itself, but what topic from the textbook are you going to talk about? And what do we already know about the topic? What research has been done on the topic? Number 3, you're going to talk about what research has already been done on the setting or environment in which the situation occurs. Okay, so are you talking about a mom and pop organization? Are you talking a Fortune 500? What do we know about the setting or environment? What research has already been done about where this kind of place happens? You're not looking for research on the specific place, but the type of place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So like, for example, I'm working in I want to talk about my experience in McDonald's. Now, McDonald's is big enough that there's probably research that has been done on McDonald's. But most of the time I might call that a fast food or service environments. You can be very broad in your description of what does the setting or environment mean, but you need to make sure that people believe that you would know something meaningful based on research about the environment in which this situation takes place. Number 3, the sample and population. What do we know about the kinds of people involved? Now, I remember something that Oscar said in our reading, every single person is different, so what's the value? That is true. We are all individuals. But if we look at individuals, we tend to have traits or characteristics that we share with other people. And so we want to identify what are some of those traits or characteristics that make somebody unique enough to participate in this study compared to the entirety of people. So people who work salaried jobs or non-salaried jobs, union jobs, people who are working entry-level positions, mid-level positions, people who are getting paid minimum wage. Do you see what I'm saying? So what research has been done on the kind of people that are going to participate in your study so that you can say that I know, this is what I know about them in general before you get started. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And then finally, I want you to look at methodological orientation. What do you think I mean by that? Methodological orientation. Trust me, it's a tongue twister.
That'd be like keeping track of the type of information that we have, like breaking it down and analyzing it.
Not yet. It gets at our epistemology. Now, that's a term that we used a couple of weeks ago. Does anybody remember what epistemology means? Ontology means what can be known.
Right, the way
Epistemology is what?
the way that we actually do it.
The way how can we know this? How can we learn? And so there's three primary models that we tend to talk about when we talk about methodological orientation. The first is qualitative or subjective knowledge. We get to know the feelings or thoughts or perspectives of individuals, right? This would be surveys or interviews, case studies. What about quantitative?
The type.
It's another type, but what type is quantitative?
Oh, the amount of information that we were getting.
Okay, quantitative normally refers to a measurable thing, but this is the experimental. This is where we identify variables, the independent variable and the dependent variable, and how changes in the independent variable or the treatment affect the dependent variable. So this is the idea of getting back to what this, remember scientific management? Scientific management was all about experimental knowledge. How does the temperature in the workplace affect productivity? How does the size of the shovel change how productive people are over the course of a week? The quality of lighting, the quality of the chairs that they're sitting in. That's quantitative. It's measurable. It's not something that can be counted. Qualitative can't be counted, right? It's all about the subjective perception or experience of the person. Does that make sense? So going back to our research question, when we look at the answer to our question, how would we find that answer? What kind of answer would it be? It would be either quantitative or quantitative. And you're going to need to explain to me, why are you using that approach? Why do you think that quantitative is the best way to find the answer to the question? Okay. Now I have one other term in there, and it's called mixed. Does anybody want to guess what mixed methods are?
They use a combination of the aforementioned methods.
Yep. So they mix both qualitative and quantitative. So it looks at how much of something does somebody do, and then it answers the question of why. So it gets into both objective and subjective things. It can be really helpful, but it can take a lot of work, and you really have to know your stuff to do mixed methods. But I want to put it out there as an option. Okay. So I've included some explanations of what I define as academic sources. This gets back to your question, Shane. Here's the types of sources that typically fit into the definition of an academic source. Here's a checklist that can help you a little bit decide if the source I found is academic or not. And then finally, can I use Wikipedia for research? And the answer, just very briefly, is I can't use Wikipedia as a citable source for my writing. It doesn't have the fact that the Wikipedia articles can be edited by a large number of individuals without any kind of vetting or review becomes problematic in terms of using it directly as a source. But most Wikipedia sources tend to include references at the bottom of their pages, external sources that you can then go and look at themselves to determine whether or not it's a good source. And that being the case, Wikipedia is a good source for doing research, but it's not a citable source. The references that it contains, I can go and look at them and use them totally legit, totally 100% fine. But I should not be using the content of Wikipedia itself as the source of reference for my papers. Now, this gets back to Shane, the question you had. How do I find articles for a lit review? I begin by choosing a topic from any of the chapters, look at the organizational text section for cited material. Were there any times where they referenced outside sources? Mark those. Then I would go to Google Scholar. Google Scholar is kind of like Google for academics, and it limits the kinds of resources that are reviewed or examined as a search engine to only those that tend to be academic sources. So what I would do is I would find any of the sources mentioned in the text, and I would go and open up Google Scholar. First of all, look for the source itself. Look for the title. Look for a full text copy of the original text. If the text is a book, we don't have time to be able to get through books at this point. Okay, you want to keep it short. Scan through the, yes.
So I remember last time when we were doing our case studies with Google Scholar, a lot of the sources I was trying to find only had a preview and then a paid entry for the full version.
A paywall, yeah. That's one of the reasons I only require you to have 2 sources per section, is because that way you don't have to feel like you have to pay for those sources. And so you might have to go through 2 or 3 pages of results to find open versions or open copies of those texts. And so that's why I'm not requiring a large number of sources for each section. Does that help?
Can we also go an example about how to find a free one?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, I want to talk about, can you guys see the page that I'm at right now? The Google Scholar page? Okay, so let's say I want to look at diversity in the web page, in the workplace. A couple of things I would probably do. I want to make sure those sources are relatively new. So I'm going to say reference sources since 2016. Okay, this one's closed. The second one's closed. Generational diversity in the workplace. A systematic review in the hospitality context. Okay, it looks like this was written in 2018, and the fact that I have this link over here, the PDF, tells me that I'll be able to get a copy of that for free. If I keep going down, anytime that it has this secondary listing over on the side, these are sources that I can get immediately for free. So for example, diversity in the workplace, an overview of disability employment disclosures among UK firms. I click on this link and it automatically opens the PDF copy. Okay, that one didn't work that well. So the second thing I might do, let's say I really wanted this particular website or this particular source. Let's say it sounds absolutely connected to what I want to talk about. I would probably open a new tab, and then I would go to isu.edu/library. And I would go to one search, and I would paste the copy of the title. Okay, it'll ask me to put in my bingo number and my last name. Okay. Actually, I've got to put in the zeros. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. I'll let it load. And so here's a place where I can get an access. Does this help, Shane?
Yep, this helps a lot.
Okay, so that's how I would instead of you having to go into Google search or Google Scholar or any of those places by yourself and try to find these things on your own, I would recommend that you go and look at the sources that the textbook, because they've already done the work for you. They've already found sources specifically discussing the topic in the text. And this is going to make it easier for you to find sources and a couple of other things. Okay, so let's say that not only do I now have a copy of this text, if you look at the bottom of this source, it says that this text has been cited by 10 other people. I click on that and I can look at every other source that has cited the original text. That suggests that all of these articles would probably be closely related to the original topic. Bam, that's 10 extra sources already that I have to pick from. Then I can also click on related articles, and this says they might not have quoted, but they happened around the same time and they happen around the same topic. And again, bam, all of a sudden I'm finding a whole bunch more research that I can look at. And it should simplify and cut down significantly on the amount of time it takes for me to find the sources that I'm looking for. All of that information, basically what I just described, is included.
Could we use the one references?
The what?
Could we use the ones that cited that source too? Could we use their articles for reference?
Absolutely. Yeah, you cannot cite the textbook, but anything that the textbook referenced is considered an outside resource. So you can start there, and then you can build off of that from the things that they talked about. All of that is 100% fair game. Okay.
For sure.
Sorry, guys. I've got a cat that doesn't seem to know his. Well, it's a cat. It automatically doesn't know where he's supposed to be. All right. The next thing is, what do I do once I've found the source that I want to use? The first thing that I'm going to recommend is you create a Word document and title it References. And then next, I copy the APA citation from Google Scholar. So if we go back to this source that I liked, this one about disability employment in UK firms, if I come down here to this little quotation mark and I click on it, it automatically displays, as much as they can find, the correct information for the citation for that source. This makes citation ridiculously easy to do. You don't have to try to figure it out on your own. So just go to the sources that you can find, and then just click on that quotation mark, and then you have your APA citation. Now, what type of citation is being displayed right here? There's two types of regular citation that appear in an essay. Does anyone know?
MLA and the APA?
Well, these are types of citations or different styles of citations, but what we see right here is what we call the bibliographical citation or the bibliographical reference. This is the full piece of information, everything I would need to be able to, know to be able to track down the source outside of the essay. If I wanted to go and find this original source, it would tell me that I need to go and find Corporate Social Responsibility Environmental Management, which is the name of a journal article, a journal. It's volume 27, issue 1, on pages 1 through 8 from this article that was written this year. This is separate from what we call in-text citation. In-text citation is the kind of breadcrumb we put in the body of the essay that refers back to this. In APA citation, I would normally just put Quan 2020, because that would be enough information if I went to the references page to figure out that I'm looking at this particular source, and then I could go and find that source someplace else. Does that make sense?
You want that as an in-text citation, just like a parentheses Quan 2020, so that way you can go find it in the references itself?
I would copy both. I would copy this, and I would put this down when I'm going to do my annotation. I would copy this, because that way, if I have it once, that way I know that I don't have to go and try to find it again if I decide to use it later. Every time I find a source, I want to copy the bibliography or the bibliographical entry, because that way, if I have to find it again, I have all the information I need. If all I wrote down was Quan 2020, there's a lot of people named Quan who might be writing articles in 2020. It would be a lot harder for me to track this particular article down to where so I could find it again. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so my suggestion when writing your review is create your document, copy the APA citation, and put that onto your references page so you know that you have it. If you find a source and you cannot cite it, you cannot use it. That's why you always have sources. Make sure anytime you look at a source, you copy its bibliography. That covers your base in case if you don't want to use it, you can delete it. That's fine. But if you want to use it and you can't cite it, if you don't have the bibliography, you can't use it. So that's why my first recommendation, whenever you're using a source, find the source, find the bibliography, and copy it. Okay. Number 2, read through the abstract. If the abstract sounds like it could be something that could be useful to you, keep going. If it doesn't, let it go, delete it, and move on to the next one. Read the introduction. Highlight any information about what it says about your topic. Okay. Once you're done and you found all of those things that you want, then you're just basically going to write a paragraph summary of the source. Your lit review is simply going to be summaries of the articles you read and how they relate to your research topic. That's all you're writing for your annotation. 1 paragraph per each source, so it's going to be a total of 10 sources, 10 paragraphs, but each paragraph is simply a summary of the article that you read and how it relates to the area that you're talking about. Does that make sense to everybody? And please, not everybody at once.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we got it.
All right. So that's as far as I want to go today, just because I don't want we've got plenty of time to talk about the other things. My focus right now is I want everybody to download the research prospectus template that is located right outside of this section right here. Okay, that is a Word document. I do not recommend trying to put this into Google Docs because Google Docs will change the formatting and it gets a little bit funky. I recommend that you work on this in Microsoft Word. And we're going to focus on these things: properly formatted title page, the abstract, table of contents, your introduction, problem statement, problem question, and problem need. Okay. Here's how those things are going to get graded. And that's due, again, by Sunday. Does anybody have any questions so far? Oh, looks like I do have one. Yes, I do have, I think I might even have a link to it here. Do I have the link to it? I don't think so. I can find it. There's I used to have a link about how to install. Yeah, you can. If you have a computer at home that has that doesn't have Microsoft, you can install Microsoft 365 for free. Any other questions? Okay, so the plan is I will be in class on Wednesday. My recommendation, if at all possible, is to be there. If you can, work on this before class and either print it out before class or print it out when you get to class, and give me a chance to give you some feedback. The first 3 sections are an easy layup and some easy points. Just basically making some minor changes and then printing it out, and you're good to go with that introduction.
So what if we don't have the ability to print it out?
When you come to class, we have a printer in class.
Okay, so we just do like a USB thing.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that there are people that are not going to be able to come to class, period. One thing I'm going to do differently this class period, or for this that I didn't do with the case study, is I am going to be taking attendance, and we will have Zoom on. And so if you submit something by email to me during class, I will be able to answer questions and give you feedback by email and by conversation on Zoom. So make sure that if you don't come to class, that you do log on to Zoom. Carter, for example, I know you and Skylar probably are going to need online access. So log on to Zoom like you normally would. One thing I'm going to ask, just to keep things a little bit easier, if you want to get feedback, number one, put it in a Word doc or put it in a Word document, not a PDF, and email me a copy of the document directly. Don't share documents with me because it doesn't show up in my email the same way. Email me directly, attach the file you want me to give you feedback on. If I can get to it during class, I will. If not, then I will give you feedback on the next class period. Anything else?
So what's the expected response time we can get from an email that we just sent to you?
If you just sent something to me today, my hope is to try to get to it today, but most of the time I will probably tell you that I will get it to you within a class period. So you're going to have basically Wednesday and Friday to get feedback.
Okay.
Just because I have other classes and things like that, I will not typically answer emails about questions related to the thing outside of class time. Anything else? Okay. So you guys there, so I'll make sure I get the attendance early for you guys. Anybody else have anything else you'd like to talk about?
Most of that was kind of broken up for me anyways.
Yeah, my kids are online doing classwork, so I apologize for that. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, if not, I will see you all in class on,
Okay, see you in class.
You're breaking up.
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'll talk to you guys later.